It was one of the oddest moments in my life. And I think back to the time, and when I was 23 years old, I don't know how you were when you were 23, but I look back on that time when I was 23, and I just wish now that I was even remotely as smart as I was then. You know, when I was 23, I knew everything. And unfortunately, I was not shy telling other people what I thought. And these times with Jones when he would be talking and giving such great wisdom, and I was just bursting at the seams for him to shut up so that I could talk. And I would often say things like, well, you know, let me tell you what I think. Or I would say, yeah, he would say something, and I'd say, yeah, okay, well, I hear you, but I think, and you know, this would go on just day after day, and I would say, you know, I have been thinking, and if you will think about this, because I think, and Jones stuck out his hand, he said, hey, you want to be careful with that. And I said, be careful with what? He said, you want to be careful with that thinking thing, because it'll really get you in trouble. He said, you know, you can't always believe everything you think. It was very odd to me, and it has been years to really understand what he meant by that. Let me ask you, have you ever been so sure of something, you were just absolutely sure, you knew it to be a fact, and you could argue it, and you could win the argument, and then you found out, maybe a couple of years later, or several months later, or a week later, you found out, oh, that wasn't entirely correct. Have you ever been wrong about something that at one point you thought you were right? Well, of course you have. Okay, so does the possibility exist that you might be wrong about something now? And you would say, well, Andy, of course the possibility exists that I might be wrong about something now. Okay, well, if the possibility exists that you might be wrong about something, then we don't really know what that might be, do we? And we don't know how many things we might be wrong about. And yet, as humans, most of us only think as hard as we're forced to think. Because when we bump up against something that we know, well, we already know that. And so we lean to the left or lean to the right, and we go after something we don't know, or we ponder something we don't know. There are times in our lives that we know something and we just don't think about it anymore. And what I'm saying is, what Jones was saying is that when we think at a certain level, rarely do we push past that. Rarely do we really dig in and seek wisdom about the things that we already know. Why is that? Because we already know them. This is what we think. But if we're wrong, we can't believe everything we think. And his words, don't believe everything you think, was his way of telling me, buddy, you need to keep pushing the boundaries of that envelope that you are in. You need to keep pushing the boundaries of what you think, of what you know. There's so much more to understand. You know, wisdom takes us beyond what we know. When we believe everything we think, it's kind of like an old fruit tree, just kind of there. We're still taking up space in the orchard. We're still breathing in that carbon dioxide. We're still causing everybody to work around us, but there's no value there. There's no benefit there. There's no continued production. You know, at one time in our life we produced fruit, but now we know. And because we know, we don't continue to ask questions. So you understand, right, that if you believe everything you think, that stops you at a certain point. Now, think about this. Did you catch that? Think about this. There was a time when the apple fell on Newton's head, and And all of a sudden, this gravity thing, he figured it out and he was able to explain it to society. All right, do we think that Newton was the very first guy, was the only guy in history who ever had an apple fall on his head, or ever watched a rock fall, or ever saw a dead bird fall from the sky, or whatever? No. I mean, but people only knew what they knew, and they thought what they thought, and yet Newton, for whatever reason, pushed beyond what he knew and really struck, because it's not easy. I mean, it's a struggle to think beyond what we know, which is why most people don't do it, frankly. But he struggled beyond what his concept of the world was at that time. And so he is the one we remember who was able to explain it to people. All right, now consider this. It's still going on today. Because you and I, we kind of know what Newton said about gravity, and we know it's the thing that pulls its weight, and we kind of know it. Okay, but there are still today people who are pushing the boundaries of what we know about gravity. And these people have monetized the concept. People ask me a lot about their finances and all. Well, these people, these are people who are trying to figure out, how do we get to Mars? These are people who are figuring out new ways of air travel. These are people who figure out new kinds of suspension bridges and any number of things that the principle of gravity holds sway over. But these people have jobs doing it. These people are creating businesses doing it. And all I'm saying is, at one time, nobody knew what gravity was. And then one guy pushed through what he thought and created a new paradigm for all of us. And we all kind of know what we know about gravity. We believe what we think, and we don't think past it. And yet, there are people passing us up on this race to understand gravity. They have even monetized it, created financial opportunities because they're willing to think beyond what they know. Okay, so what do you know about parenting? What do you know about your relationships? What do you know about financial achievement? Is there the opportunity? Does the opportunity exist to think beyond what you think? Yes, it does. Because you can't believe everything you think.